Cloke is a mediator, a facilitator, arbitrator, a coach, and a trainer specializing in communication, dialogue, collaborative negotiation, and consensus building, and has published 15 books on conflict resolution, many of which are on my shelf here. Highly recommended. Is based in California and in the United States of America, but has worked in more than 20 countries. He is the director of the Center for Dispute Resolution. He is the founder and first president of Mediators Beyond Borders International, and he led a delegation of mediators to the Copenhagen COP. I notified Ken that I'd let him know at the 5-minute and 3-minute left point, and I'll do that with the bell. Over to you.
Thank you, Christine, and thank you all for joining this call and taking time out for this incredibly important issue. Let me begin by saying that we all recognize, I think, the urgency of doing something about this. And we have two essential facts. First, we have a global problem. And second, we have predominantly national problem-solving methodologies. And I think also we have a kind of antiquated system for drawing people into conversations and into pushing those conversations in the direction of real agreement. So there are a couple of ideas that I would like to suggest, and these begin from an understanding of really two essential sets of skills that haven't been focused on significantly this morning. One of those is mediation, and the other is conflict resolution systems design. And what we require is a systems design process for looking at how this system as a whole is operating, where it gets stopped, and what can be done in order to try to facilitate some forward movement. So to begin with, let's see, it says host disabled participant screen sharing.
Ooh.
So.
Oh, we'll just get Cell to fix that.
Okay. Let's see. Maybe if you list me as co-host.
Yeah, maybe I have the power to do that. Let me just see here.
Okay.
There we are. I don't have that power, but Giselle, I think you do as being our commander-in-chief.
Okay. Well, let's see. Well, I think that I'll just kind of proceed without the slides. And then what we'll do is we can make those available, or if something shifts, we can go ahead. If we take a look at any mediation, and I've been doing this now for 41 years full-time, and I am not unique in having had this experience. And the experience fundamentally, as Christine described in working with large group, multi-stakeholder consensus building processes, is that there are really three fundamental pieces of this process. One is the organization of dialogues and the facilitation of those dialogues, as spoken about by Dorota earlier. A second is consensus building, which we just heard a presentation about. And the third element in this is impasse resolution. That is discovering the sources of impasse and figuring out what methodologies might be able to draw you closer to some set of agreements. And this is what mediators routinely do. But beyond these is the systems design idea.
Okay.
Let me see now if I can share my, no, it still says host disabled participant screen sharing. So let me give you a couple of ideas about what we can do. And I've labeled this 20 ways to improve UNFCCC meetings. Um, Perhaps what I can just do is make those slides available to everyone. Christine, I don't know if that's, so it says I'm now the co-host. Okay, so here we go. Okay, so here are some of these 20 ways. I'm not going to go through these because we don't have time, but let me just discuss a couple of these. And I'm going to skip ahead now to the second page in this process. And that is, I'm going to start with point number 8, which is to have all of the parties include in their delegations experienced negotiators, facilitators, ombudspeople, mediators, and to have people meet with the parties in advance of the COP and of negotiating sessions to help set targets and timetables, encourage compromises that could lead to better and quicker agreements, to drastically simplify and reduce the rigidity and formality of the protocols, the rules, the informal processes as they affect the negotiations and the agreement writing process. To create more small group conversations within the COP itself, offer free trainings throughout the process in collaborative negotiation, facilitation, I should include consensus building, conflict resolution. Number 13, create fast-forming, diverse problem-solving teams on specific topics with experts from all the various groups. Periodically conduct process checks to make sure that things are going well. Again, I'm going to skip ahead here and go to point number 17, I'm sorry, to focus not only on reaching a single comprehensive agreement, but smaller, specialized, limited, tentative, provisional, national, regional, and block agreements, and then try to accumulate and amalgamate those into a single comprehensive draft. Allow facilitators to stop the process if it isn't working. And I can tell you from my experience in Copenhagen, and Tom Futak, who is on this call from the Mediators Beyond Borders International climate change team, who's attended many of these COPs, can tell you that this happens often, that the process just isn't working, and yet everyone kind of soldiers on and continues having the conversation that isn't working, rather than stopping, critiquing it, reformulating it, and figuring out how to improve it. And then to consider the entire multi-year agreement drafting process as a conflict system and use systems design principles to figure out ways of understanding how it gets stuck and how to get it unstuck. And then to realize that what we are working with here is the United Nations as an organization. And as an organization, there are a variety of ways in which, for example, the Secretary General, the Assistant Secretary General in charge of ombuds and mediation services can be brought into climate change conversations. The Mediation Support Unit at the United Nations can be brought into this work. But now what I'd like to do is to look for a moment at why these collaborations fail, why collaborative efforts often fail. One, because we don't involve those who are immediately impacted by the problem. Two, and I think this is really important, because we have simply been too timid and we have not included strategic or systemic objectives, that is, as conflict resolvers that we need to. We've excluded critics with useful ideas, etc. So there are a variety of these, and I think we can go down. This is a generic summary, but we can go down and see that many of these apply to the COPs. And here's page 2 of this. Once again, I think, Christine, you can provide these slides to people, to anyone who's interested. And I'd just like to mention the last one on this list, the failure to transform the culture, the processes, the relationships that exist between people and significantly alter day-to-day behaviors. And I can tell you that the Harvard Business Review did a study several years ago of 300 large-scale corporate change efforts that had failed. And they asked the question, why did these change efforts fail? And the single most common answer was the failure to change the culture of the organization. That is, what it is that everybody believed was the right way of doing things. And then if we take a look at consensus building as a large-scale process, here's a kind of 10-step overview of how to do consensus building that we have not really applied to the COP process. And you can see there are a variety of steps in here. And the one that I would especially like to call our attention to is number 8, which is mediation and impasse resolution. We're going to need a great deal more of this in Glasgow than we have had before. We have done some of the earlier parts of this, but not nearly enough. And I think all of it needs to really be worked on. If we just take a look at one of the pieces of this, which is about convening, the phase of convening, how do we convene people? How do we create a process? And here are a series of steps that can be taken. How do we clarify roles and responsibilities? Once again, a series of steps. Investigating and deliberating, mediating and deciding, implementing and improving. And here are from Peter Adler, 16 steps for large group dialogues in a really terrific little piece that once again is available for people to use. So the goal of this is to say one sort of really important thing. We need to bring in people with experience in conflict resolution into the process and ask them to help design sub-processes, micro-processes even, that can begin to be effective. And I think we need to begin this starting in Glasgow. There will, in fact, be present a number of mediators who can be consulted, who can be spoken about about these processes. But I think that for our purposes, we need to, instead of just sitting back and watching this go on and watching the failures in process and the failures in how this conversation is taking place, we need to actually become more proactive and step in with suggestions, with concrete ideas, with support for people who are attempting to make this work. A great deal hangs in the balance, as we've heard from the beginning of this presentation. And I think we need to bring what we know into the room and help organize that in a way that will allow the process to become successful. Thank you, Chris.